Level 1, $20,000. The calculator app is still open on your phone when you fall asleep, the screen dimming on its own after you stop touching it. You make $10 an hour, which comes out to $1,400 a month after taxes. And you know this number the way you know your own name, without having to think about it. Rent is $750 for a room, not an apartment, a room, with someone else's schedule bleeding through the wall at 2 in the morning. You buy the store brand without checking the name brand first anymore. That comparison stopped being useful a year ago. You put the olive oil back on the shelf and don't think about it as a sacrifice, just as the correct answer to a math problem you've already solved 1,000 times. Your car has a check engine light that's been on so long it feels less like a warning and more like a permanent feature of the dashboard, a small orange reminder that everything is barely holding. You put $20 of gas in at a time, never more, because filling the tank means not having something else. At the register, your card gets declined, not because the money isn't there, but because the transfer you made that morning hasn't cleared yet. You step aside, you open the app, you refresh it twice while the person behind you shifts their weight from one foot to the other. Something in you gets smaller in that 30 seconds that has nothing to do with the $11. Your friends from high school went two different directions, some to college, some straight into better jobs, and you see the difference on your phone at midnight in a parking lot, eating something that cost $5 between shifts. You stop comparing not because you've made peace with it, but because comparing feels like staring directly at the sun. It doesn't illuminate anything, it just burns. The first rule, at $20,000, you don't manage money. Money manages you, and it manages you the way weather manages a person standing outside without a coat. Level 2, $35,000. The first salary that feels less like scraping by and more like an actual floor. You move into your own apartment, not a room, a real one-bedroom. And the silence on the other side of your own front door feels like the most expensive thing you've ever owned. More expensive than anything with a price tag. You fill the gas tank all the way for the first time in years and watch the number climb to full without doing math in your head. And people who've always had this will never understand what that specific feeling is worth. You buy new shoes, not expensive ones, just new, and you wear them the next day with a posture that's very slightly different than it was the day before. But $35,000 in a city charging $1,200 for a one-bedroom is still tight. You just don't feel the tightness in your throat anymore. It moved down into your shoulders, quieter, but still there. You start noticing people around you earning a little more, not a lot more, just enough that their weekends look different, their stress looks different, and you're not jealous exactly. You're just aware now in a way you weren't before. You check your account on Fridays out of habit rather than panic. The number is never exciting, but it's not terrifying either, and that middle ground between exciting and terrifying is where $35,000 lives. Level 3, $55,000. You are statistically exactly average, and somehow average feels smaller than you expected it to feel. You did everything you were told to do. Degree, steady job, direct deposit every 2 weeks. And normal starts to feel like the ceiling instead of the floor. You run the numbers one night for no reason other than curiosity. $55,000 for the next 30 years with modest raises, and the number at the end is survivable. Not exciting. Survivable. You feel something you didn't expect to feel looking at that projection. Not fear exactly. More like disappointment arriving slowly, the way cold seeps in through a window frame you can't quite locate. You find out a coworker in a different department makes $80,000 doing work that looks, from the outside, identical to yours. The gap isn't just the number, it's a different apartment, a different car, a different version of freedom you don't have access to for reasons that have nothing to do with effort. You start thinking about more, not out of greed, out of a sharper version of the awareness that first showed up at $35,000. You can see both directions clearly now, $20,000 behind you and grateful for the distance, $100,000 ahead of you and hungry for it. The third rule, $55,000 is the mirror. It shows you exactly where you are and exactly where you are not. And looking away doesn't change what's in the reflection. Level 4, $78,000. Something shifts, not in the account, in the mornings. You wake up and money isn't the first thought anymore. It's present, but it's not leading. For the first time, you think about what you want before you think about what you can afford, and the order of those two thoughts matters more than you expected it to. You move into a slightly bigger apartment, a second bedroom you turn into an office, a kitchen you actually cook in instead of survive in. You book a flight without waiting for a sale to appear. Small shifts, but they feel enormous to a version of you that remembers $20,000 in painful detail. People start calling you successful, and the word feels borrowed, like a jacket that fits but isn't yours, because you already know what 100,000 looks like from here, and 78 still feels like a waiting room. The gap between you and old friends starts showing up in silences instead of arguments, in things you stop mentioning because talking about your new apartment to someone renting a room feels like a language they didn't sign up to hear. The fourth rule, 78,000 is where money gets quiet, and in that quiet, you finally start hearing yourself think. Level 5, $100,000. Six figures, the number everyone chases without quite knowing why. Crossing it doesn't feel like a rival. It feels like walking through a door into a room bigger than expected, with more doors inside it you didn't know were there. Taxes take more than you imagined, and in an expensive city, $100,000 is survival money wearing a nicer title. You're rich to your family, average to your coworker, and somehow behind compared to your neighbor, and the same number means completely different things depending entirely on who's doing the looking. You stop telling people what you make. Not out of humility, out of protection, because at this number, everyone suddenly has an opinion about money they've never actually held themselves. The lifestyle upgrade doesn't feel the way you assumed it would. Better apartment, better food, but the jump from 78 to 100 doesn't feel anything like the jump from 20 to 35. That first jump changed your life. This one just changed your options, and options without clarity turn out to be just a more comfortable version of feeling lost. The fifth rule, six figures, is a door, not a destination, and what's waiting on the other side is a question, not an answer. Level 6, $150,000. Life changes in ways you can actually see now, not dramatically, but visibly. The apartment is nicer, the vacations are real trips instead of long weekends nearby, but the biggest shift isn't material, it's social. You stop relating easily to conversations about money problems, not because you don't care, but because you've genuinely forgotten what that specific texture of stress feels like. And forgetting creates a distance you don't notice until someone reminds you of it. A friend asks to borrow a small amount of money, small to you, everything to them. You say yes without thinking twice, and the way they say thank you carries a weight you weren't expecting to feel on the receiving end. You start measuring life in freedom instead of paychecks. Can you leave this job without panic? Can you take a month off? Can you say no to things that drain you without real consequences? The honest answer is almost, not yet, but almost. And almost turns out to be its own specific kind of tension. The sixth rule, 150,000 is where money stops being the conversation and starts being the silence between conversations that nobody quite has anymore. Level 7, $250,000. A different world with a different vocabulary. You talk about tax optimization instead of tax refunds, asset allocation instead of savings accounts, and your accountant costs more than your first car did. The people around you earn similar numbers, not by careful design, just by a kind of social gravity that pulls similar incomes into the same rooms. Dinners happen where nobody checks the bill. Weekends happen where nobody suggests the cheaper option, not because anyone's showing off, but because cost genuinely stopped being a variable in most decisions. You stop explaining your life to people who don't live at this altitude, not out of arrogance, out of accuracy, because the language simply doesn't translate anymore. When you mention your tax situation is complicated to someone earning $35,000, their eyes change, not with judgment, with distance, the exact same distance you used to feel looking upward from $20,000. Now someone is looking up at you with that same expression, and understanding both sides of that exchange makes it lonelier, not less. The seventh rule, the higher the salary climbs, the smaller the circle gets, and the smaller the circle, the quieter the room becomes. Level 8, $500,000. Money becomes something closer to invisible. You stop checking prices, stop checking your balance out of habit, because decisions aren't measured in cost anymore. They're measured in time. Everything gets weighed by what it costs you in hours versus what it saves you in hours versus what earns money while you're doing something else entirely. Your problems have different names now: estate planning, trust structures, capital gains, words that didn't exist in your vocabulary at $20,000 because the money never required them to. The isolation is real, not loneliness exactly, something adjacent to it. The version of you eating a $5 meal between shifts wouldn't recognize this life. And you're not sure you could explain it to him without sounding like someone you used to resent from a distance. The eighth rule, $500,000 doesn't buy happiness. It buys distance. Distance from struggle, from certain people, from the version of yourself who understood exactly what $10 an hour actually felt like in the body. Level 9, $1 million a year. You don't say the number out loud, and almost nobody at this level does either. It exists mostly in tax documents and wire transfers and conversations with attorneys who bill by the 6-minute increment. You walk into rooms where real decisions get made, not because of fame, but because your judgment and your capital have both become genuinely useful to the people already sitting there. And that's a different kind of invitation entirely, structural instead of social. The distance from $20,000 is permanent now, not just financial, but psychological, emotional, load-bearing. You remember the parking lot, the $5 meal, the declined card at the register, the same way you remember a country you lived in briefly as a child, familiar in outline but foreign in feeling, yours once but not anymore in any way that matters day to day. The 9th rule. At $1 million, money stops measuring your worth and starts measuring your reach, and reach changes everything it eventually touches, including you. Somewhere right now, someone is making $10 an hour sitting in a parking lot between shifts eating something cheap and fast. Phone screen cracked, gas tank sitting at half, scrolling job listings at midnight that all ask for experience nobody will give them a chance to earn. They think this is a story about the number. It isn't. It's about what the number slowly does to the distance between who you are right now and who you eventually become. The paycheck lands every 2 weeks. It takes whoever shows up to collect it, and